Imagine if you'd been impacted by a major storm, hoping the government, the one that you send your taxpayer funds to, will aid in your recovery, only to discover that if you support Donald Trump, they're going to ignore you altogether.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America, welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. While the post-election hoopla is all dominating the news cycle, whether it be the formation of Trump's new cabinet, some interesting picks there, or whether it be the schadenfreude coming from the left, whether they should go further left, come back to the center, some blue anon theories out there about recounts and looking for missing votes and all that nonsense, it's easy to forget about the tragedies that happened in America's Southeast, specifically the continuing recovery from Hurricanes Helene and Milton going on in Florida and in the Carolinas. This is particularly sensitive for me because I endured, along with my family, the after effects of Superstorm Sandy in the People's Republic of New York City, and we had to deal with all types of red tape from different levels of government, different inspections, different applications and registrations and all that nonsense. And it turned out really that we had to fix everything ourselves, and the government wasn't exactly great help for us.
Bureaucratic incompetence.
So when I hear a story about a scandal concerning FEMA's response and the possibility of political discrimination, that really hits home with me and gets under my skin. So I want to look further into this. Let's look at the news stories, how the media handle those news stories, and whether or not this was just a single bad actor, or is that person being scapegoated because of political expediency. We got a lot to cover here, and we're going to get to all of it. Before we do all that, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you're seeing here in this or any other video on the channel, smash that thumbs up button. Like, comment, share the show with your friends, all that really, really good stuff, because all that's going to help this little political channel grow thanks to the YouTube algorithm.
Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now!
I say it in every video. I'm going to say it in this one too. Thank you guys so much for all that you do to help grow the channel, whether it's watching and sharing the videos on YouTube, on Rumble, on X. I appreciate everything that you do. And for all you newbies out there who may have found this channel for the first time on any of those platforms, I hope this video earns your subscription as we look deeper into this budding scandal involving political discrimination against Trump supporters by a federal agency that is charged with supporting victims of disaster. Let's see what we'll find out here. The Daily Wire initially brought this story out into the national spotlight, and then many news organizations started reporting about it. Let's take this from Fox News.
The senior national correspondent Kevin Cork is live in D.C. with what we're learning about this tonight. Kevin, good evening.
Evening, Trace. Quite a story. Imagine if you'd been impacted by a major storm, hoping the government, the one that you send your taxpayer funds to, will aid in your recovery, only to discover that if you support Donald Trump, they're going to ignore you altogether. And that's apparently what happened in the great state of Florida, where a FEMA supervisor allegedly told workers in a message to avoid homes advertising Trump as they canvassed Lake Placid, Florida, to identify residents who could qualify for federal aid.
Pretty big allegation. By the way, this is the same allegation that the Trump campaign was saying before this story broke with the Daily Wire. Speaking of the Daily Wire, let's see what they reported on exactly.
A FEMA supervisor told workers in a message to avoid homes advertising Trump as they canvassed Lake Placid, Florida, to identify residents who could qualify for federal aid. Internal messages viewed by the Daily Wire reveal. The supervisor, Marn'i Washington, relayed this message both verbally and in group chat used by the relief team. Multiple government employees told the Daily Wire.
In response to the reporting by the Daily Wire, Fox News, and every other news agency piggybacking on the story, FEMA had this response.
FEMA helps all survivors, regardless of their political preference or affiliation, and we are deeply disturbed by this employee's actions. While we believe this is an isolated incident, We've taken measures to remove the employee from their role and are investigating the matter to prevent this from happening ever again. The employee who issued this guidance had no authority and was given no direction from anyone to tell teams to avoid these homes. And we are reaching out to the people who have not been reached as a result of this incident.
Now, I had mentioned that the Trump campaign had initially made the allegation about concerns with disaster relief in Florida and whether or not people were being treated fairly. In response to these allegations from the Trump campaign, the mainstream media did what the mainstream media always does. They deny, and cast aspersions on the Trump campaign.
Politicizing a natural disaster, what FEMA is warning about.
The only person making an accusation that people are not getting what they've asked for is Trump, falsely claiming that the administration is withholding resources because of political affiliation. That is just not true.
They then turn around and go, see, FEMA's not coming to help you because it's a Republican area. And then people go, see? No, not see. You've got to see for the first time in your life if you're MAGA. Donald Trump is a con man using you as his mark. Donald Trump's a ridiculous, pathetic liar.
What would you say to people propagating misinformation about the emergency response to these storms?
Stop politicizing FEMA.
Elon Musk is hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA while claiming his desire to help the hurricane victims with free Starlink access to the internet.
Donald Trump is literally putting lives at risk right now. If you can't trust FEMA and trust basic weather reports, for example, which he's questioned in the past.
Elon Musk, the richest man in the world and top Trump ally, has also pushed lies about the hurricane to his millions of followers on the social media platform he owns.
Now, unfortunately, tragically, quite frankly, it is politicized.
The only person who is politicizing this is Donald Trump. He's the one guy doing it.
Before Hurricane Milton has even made landfall, the former president is already, and for the second time in almost as many weeks, politicized the federal response.
Look, situations like this where people desperately do need help should not be politicized.
This kind of misinformation is making people fear that the government is not going to be there to help them when they are.
Politics and the rampant disinformation that's being peddled by Donald Trump and some Republicans.
This is what a FEMA spokesperson said. They posted this on X. FEMA has what it needs for immediate response and recovery efforts. But there's we're just, sort of lost at sea in this tide of disinformation.
Why does Donald Trump continue to insist on politicizing the storm?
He was politicizing this hurricane response, saying that it's been a terrible response from the White House.
Donald Trump wasted little time politicizing this tragedy even further than he already has.
Trump, again, trying to politicize the response to the hurricane.
The Biden administration is effectively handling this. They're just not politicizing it as Donald Trump.
You guessed it. Wrong again. They jumped on Trump like they always jump on Trump, which has caused what we've been talking about for years as this crisis of confidence in mainstream media, especially coming from the left. Is it any wonder that post-election both CNN and MSDNC's ratings dropped like a stone? Is it any surprise to anybody that CNN is talking about laying off people and asking for cuts in salary to some of their high-priced talent? Are you surprised at all that MSDNC may be sold off by Comcast? This crisis of confidence is because they get it wrong all the time. They were wrong about Donald Trump. They were wrong about Kamala Harris. And they were especially wrong about this story in particular.
They lie. They're liars.
So now that we're getting back to reality in media and reporting, let's talk about the Daily Wire story and this woman, Marn'i Washington. Turns out she did an interview with Roland Martin and revealed a lot more detail than what the Daily Wire initially reported.
When were you notified? Because the Daily Wire said there was a whistleblower who made this point. Go ahead.
I was notified after I demobbed. The next morning, they told me verbally I was fired, but they never provided me anything in writing stating that I was fired. They all alleged that these actions were made on my own recognizances and that it was for my own political advances. However, if you look at the record, there is what we call a community trend. And unfortunately, it just so happened that the political hostility that was encountered by my team, and I was on 2 different teams during this deployment, they just so happened to have the Trump campaign signage. FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas. Senior leadership will lie to you and tell you that they do not know. But if you ask the DSA crew leads and specialists what they are experiencing in the field, they will tell you. Demand for FEMA to give you those incident reports. They will substantiate what is happening to us in the field.
This is getting very interesting. It seems like Miss Washington here is saying that she's a scapegoat for FEMA, who not only knows about this, I guess, trend that she's talking about of bad interactions. We'll get more into that in a moment. Not only happening in Florida, but also happening in the Carolinas, calling it colossal. This was the big grab from yesterday's media, talking about how FEMA has this growing scandal of discrimination against the Trump homeowners in both Florida and in the Carolinas. Let's see what else we can glean from this interview.
What we do is we discuss community trends. So if we are noticing, for example, on Mary Street, you'll find 3 or 4 homes that we tried to canvass and we were greeted with unwelcomed arms, or people are coming out guns blazing or he's screaming at us, then that's a street we need to avoid altogether.
That's profiling.
Okay, I think we can all understand that. If you're in a disaster area and you're going door to door to register people for aid programs and things like that, you're going to be met with some hostility, I'm sure. FEMA doesn't have the best reputation in the world. I think people would have a negative view of FEMA and any delay. I know that during Superstorm Sandy, my family and I were extremely frustrated with FEMA and their lack of responsiveness to our particular neighborhood. So I can get that frustration. But where does this trend come from? Is it only coming from Trump supporters? Is that what she's trying to say?
So you talked about hostility. This was a text message that you sent us where one of the folks out there said, "Good morning, LeGros Road is politically hostile. We are not canvassing this street any further. Moved on to North Lakeview Road. Great decision. Thanks for the update."
Exactly. So my senior leadership was aware of the amount of encounters that was going on in the field. Again, this was my second time and a second crew in Florida and experiencing unwelcomed behavior from the residents. Now, not all Floridians have been unpleasant, but for the most part, the ones that are very passionate about their disdain for FEMA, they have no problem expressing it.
Describe for me what political hostility means.
Okay, this is a decent question. Let's get to the crux of it now. We're kind of dancing around all the issues here. We're talking about, trends and political hostility. Let's get to the meat of this, the meat and potatoes of it. What you say, Trump, is basically what I want to hear. Are you saying that political hostility is only coming from Trump at this point? What's the deal?
People will tell you, I don't like FEMA. That's part of the Biden-Harrison campaign. You guys are lying to people. You're not helping people. You don't even give people the essential needs funding, the $750. A lot of people think
so. When the people, so again, I just want to try to understand. So when the people who out in the field reporting to you, they were they approaching these homes, knocking on the door, or people out there in the yard saying this? And so when that homeowner makes these statements, then what then does the worker do? Does the worker say, "Sir, ma'am, thank you very much"? And do they then notate political hostility? Do they move to the next house?
Yes, they are to de-escalate and disengage immediately, walk away from the home, complete the notation of what the encounter was, and move on to the next home.
Does FEMA have that documented, that this is the way it's supposed to be done?
Oh, yes. Ask them for it.
Okay, so I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that FEMA has rules and procedures about de-escalation when dealing with hostility in general. I don't think FEMA has anything in their policies and procedures to discriminate against one political persuasion over the other. Right now, I'm not hearing anything about how this directive, you saw it in black and white, how this directive of avoiding all houses with Trump signs came about. Where the hell did that come from?
The important thing is here, once we start seeing a trend, for example, if they just so happen to have these Trump campaign signs in front of their home, and that's the characteristic that's coming along with that, we have to proceed with precaution. So avoidance first and then de-escalation.
There it is. The decision was made somewhere, and right now FEMA is saying it was from Miss Washington here, to avoid Trump signs and avoid the houses with those Trump signs. There are other ways that FEMA can identify places that are telling them that they're not wanted. You can put a sign up saying that, no FEMA. Sometimes you put a shade of paint on it. You can pick a shade of paint that FEMA would then know not to knock on your door. But she's specifically saying that it got to a point where Trump signs became a signal to the canvassers in Florida that she was supervising, that became a signal to them to not even knock on the door, regardless of whether the person there wanted FEMA assistance or not. That's political discrimination.
And that's the thing. Our superiors know that. We have constant conversations about keep your people safe. If your people are uncomfortable, then just don't go.
So explain this to me, please. Explain this to me. Okay. So I'm just trying to understand what that means. So again, if I'm on a house, if I'm on a street and it has 20 homes, and there are 8 homes on that street with Trump signs, and my team has faced hostility from 3 of the homes that have signs. What happens next?
I inform my TFL, my direct report, hey, we're again experiencing hostile encounters. We're moving on to another street. We're not canvassing those homes. We will canvass the ones that do not have the community trend with the Trump campaigns signage and let it go. If any of those residents come outside that have the Trump campaign signage and they say, hey, I want to register, we'll welcome them arms. We will let you register. Great, wonderful. But we will not subject our people to continuous verbal abuse or hostile encounters.
So basically, once they get some resistance or they get some negative feedback and there's a Trump sign on their lawn, they decide that all the other Trump signed houses, they're not even going to bother going to them. They basically said, screw those people. We're not dealing with them because they're being negative. Does that sound right to you? Let's make that the question of the day here. Does this sound like a FEMA policy or a Marn'i Washington policy? Let's get into the comments together and discuss that.
That's what I need to know. So, but again, though, this is what I'm trying to understand here. What happens to the other 17 homes on that street?
So the ones that do not have the trend, you got to watch what you're saying, because you're saying the ones without the Trump campaign signage. If those are the ones that we have experienced the consistent hostility from, then those are the ones that we're going to avoid. Our equity in DSA is canvassing and registering, so we're going to take care of those other homes on the street. But we're going to avoid the ones that meet the community trend of political hostility, and they just so happen to have campaign signages in their front yard.
And this is the issue here. This is political profiling at this point. You have some negative encounters at properties where there's Trump signage. But why do you have in writing directives saying don't go to any Trump homes? That's the disconnect for me here. If you're on a block and you're having a negative experience, I get that. Negativity breeds negativity going forward. But when you start off your day with a directive saying, screw the Trump people, that now becomes political profiling and discrimination of that victim's viewpoint. Remember, these are victims of a disaster. They can be frustrated. They're entitled to be frustrated if months after the disaster, they're still not out of their situation. They're still not getting responded to. There's no responsiveness from the federal government. I think they're entitled to be upset about that. And they're certainly be entitled to be upset about that because, as we saw with the mainstream media, the initial reporting that came from Team Trump was derided and cast aside and dismissed by mainstream media. So given these circumstances, these people have an absolute right to be pissed off when they see FEMA, when they see the Biden-Harris administration's FEMA coming down their block. Are these people so soft that they can't take a stern talking to? I can understand if people get threatening or if they start getting really loud and boisterous and maybe they start becoming more physically aggressive and antagonistic. I get that. But don't throw the babies out with the bathwater here. The next house may be inviting, but Miss Washington here established the standard of you now have to come to me in order to apply for the aid that you would be entitled to as a taxpayer. This is complete and utterly ridiculous. But I'm not saying that Miss Washington here is the one completely and totally at fault. Because when we come back, Marn'i Washington is going to give us some information that may require additional probing by our federal government and indeed by oversight committees in our legislature. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. I took out this small snippet from the larger interview, which, by the way, is linked in the description below. Go check it out if you want to hear the whole thing. A lot of details that are given by Marn'i Washington here, but this particular detail, to me, requires further investigation by the federal government. Marn'i Washington infers that there may be a cover-up going on within FEMA.
So if you turned in reports to your supervisors that state political hostility for the people in the field, those reports exist.
Yes, hence why I also sent you screenshots where they're deleting files now from my computer. So FEMA says they fired me, but I still have access to the systems and their applications. And while I was in an interview yesterday, I noticed that my files were being deleted in my name, and I could not have been doing that while I was talking to Madison. So FEMA is very well aware of the incidents that take place, not just with my crew, but with all of the crews in the state that's declared. And instead of just saying, hey, this is how we're going to mitigate it to protect our people, they decided to fire me and make sure Donald Trump knows that they are loyal to him because they fear retribution.
Oh, here, dial it down.
Now, I'm not going to go that far. I don't think that people in FEMA are reporting to Trump. After all, Trump reported the story initially, and everyone on the left and in the Biden administration, they basically dismissed it. Now that there's actual proof out there, thanks to the Daily Wire, it seems like FEMA is engaging in a cover-up if you believe what Marn'i Washington is saying here. I don't say I believe her or not. I think that the statement alone, the assertion, the allegation, merits further investigation federally. I think that definitely needs to get done and done quickly, especially if there's an allegation of documents being destroyed. I think Marn'i Washington needs to go up to Congress immediately, get her testimony on the record. FEMA needs to come to Congress and explain what's going on, make these documents available. There should be subpoenas going out. I think that there's a lot more to this than just one rogue person. If you believe Marn'i Washington, this is standard practice. This is what happens in these areas. And there is this trend searching. There is this idea of noticing trends, which is a veiled way of saying viewpoint discrimination, that it is commonplace in FEMA to do this viewpoint discrimination. We talk about it all the time in the People's Republic of New York City when different boroughs that are heavily Democratic will get their snow removed first, but an area like Staten Island that has a strong Republican enclave, they don't get their streets cleaned off as quickly as the rest of the city. This isn't a strange argument. This is actually a common argument, this viewpoint discrimination idea. But this is now clearly someone who is not a fan of Trump, who is working for the federal government and is being, at least from her point of view, scapegoated by the government. I don't think she's the type that's going to be taking this lying down, which is why these investigations are certainly merited. And if we round out this show back where we started in looking at a new incoming administration with new cabinet positions being filled by new people from outside of the government, a new House majority, a new Senate majority, you got to think that this allegation of viewpoint discrimination against Trump supporters is going to make the rounds in Washington. There will be investigations, maybe the DOJ, maybe the House, maybe the Senate, maybe all of the above. I don't know at this point. But given this information, given that Trump spoke out about this and the left dismissed it so out of hand, both in the media and in the administration itself, you got to think this might be a vector of attack that you're going to see the new administration take to further bring negativity towards the liberal left, the leftists, the progressives out there that perpetrated this sort of alleged viewpoint discrimination. This might be the tip of the iceberg of something bigger, or it might end with Marn'i Washington. Whatever it is, though, I'm very interested to see where this goes.
Let the games begin.
But hey, listen, that's just my opinion on all of this. What do you guys think about this? Is this the tip of the iceberg for something bigger? Is the incoming administration going to look at this? What do you think? Let's get into the comments together. And as always, like and share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. I'm really interested in what you guys think about this video, as well as all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.